thanks for clicking on the link. Or if the YouTube gods sent you here by mistake, thanks for checking out the video. If you've missed my first one showcasing this pistol and are interested in the history, development, and some of the other specs and details concerning it, go ahead and check out the other video I have on my channel for the AAC Dragonfly. It's a Browning Buckmark camper frame with an upper barrel assembly that was modified by Advanced Armament Corporation, or AAC, to be a really compact, integrally suppressed 22 pistol. So if that's something that interests you, go ahead and check that out. In this video, I'm going to do a disassembly video. I'll briefly touch on some cleaning, and then reassembly, and then the last 30 seconds or so are going to be some range clips. If the disassembly or reassembly process doesn't really interest you, I'll go ahead and post the time to skip to if you just want to check out the range clips. So other than that, feel free to like, dislike, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So other than that, we'll go ahead and get to it. And I know people are screaming, oh, you got to make sure it's clear, make sure it's safe and unloaded. If you're working with firearms, or if somebody hands you a firearm, you want to just check and make sure that it's unloaded. You should treat every firearm as if it were loaded, but you should always check. So we're good. Disassembly of this pistol is actually pretty easy. It only requires the removal of 3 screws. We're going to start with these 2 here on the top strap sight base. This is a 3/32 hex. There are washers underneath these screws, so we want to make sure that we don't lose those. And the rear sight is fully attached to this sight base, so it should all come off in one piece. We'll go ahead and retract the slide, lock it in place. You want to get it out of the way because you don't want any forward pressure on the barrel assembly here, and it also gets it out of the way of the feed ramp down there. And then we're going to go ahead and take this screw, and we're actually not going to remove it completely, although you can, but it's not necessarily needed for disassembly. And this is a 7/64 hex. So we're just going to back the screw until it protrudes out of the frame a little bit, and then you should be able to kind of rock your barrel assembly or suppressor assembly off of your frame. The cleaning process for this is a little different than the regular barrel, so I'll get to that later. Here we can see the internal workings, or at least some of them, of the firearm. This is your guide rod. This is your recoil spring or a mainspring. This is your recoil buffer. And then this insert right here is the firing pin mechanism housing. On the front side, we can see our bolt face. This little channel is where the firing pin actually comes out. This is your extractor. And then this little pin here is your ejector. I did mention in my previous video that I had one major issue with this pistol, and that was that I had actually had to replace the extractor. We'll get a better look at that in a second. So we want to drop the slide nice and easy. You don't want it slamming forward. It can come flying off. So we want to alleviate some of the pressure, remove tension from this spring, because we're going to try and extract this assembly out of the slide. And if it's under full compression and you slip, then it could go flying, knock out your TV or something like that. So we'll go ahead and pull the slide back a little bit. Oh, and that was nice. The firing pin housing actually started to come up. So usually you have to pull back a little bit and pull up on the guide rod, and then just drop it forward a little bit. And now the firing pin housing, guide rod, spring, and buffer can all come out in one piece. And the buffer is actually not attached. So if it falls off, it's no biggie. And then we can remove our slide. Here we can see the ejector a little bit better. And then this is your hammer. And we can get a better view of that. This pistol is equipped with a magazine disconnect feature, which means that if you don't have a magazine in the firearm, you can pull the trigger and nothing happens. So we'll go ahead and insert a magazine. We're going to take our thumb and cover up the hammer because we don't want the hammer to smack the frame. And then we'll go ahead and pull the trigger and try to slowly bring the hammer up. And we're good. Now we can get a better look at that. And when this is all together, the hammer hits the back of the firing pin there, which forces it out the front, which is that little channel in the bolt face, which causes the round to go off. Note that this spring is captured by a tiny C-clip on the end of the guide rod. You shouldn't have to worry about trying to keep it together unless your C-clip is broken or missing. So be aware of that. And from here, we can go ahead and wipe everything down, get any dirt and grime off of it. I try to keep oil and solvents out of the inner workings of the pistol. And the spring assembly, just because 22 ammunition is extremely dirty, and if you add that with any oils or solvents or greases or anything like that, the buildup can be pretty bad pretty quick. So I don't want to accelerate that at all. From here, you can go ahead and use your favorite solvents and oils and everything to degrease, clean your firearm, and you're good to go. Like I said, this suppressor is a little bit different. AAC's recommendation was to remove it from the firearm, and since you can't take it apart to service or clean it, their recommendation was to actually submerge the whole assembly into Croil. And if you're not familiar with it, you might have seen it before. But it's mainly used for penetrating rust and to remove stuck nuts and bolts. So that was their recommendation in 2006 when I purchased this pistol, and I've been using it ever since, and it seems to work pretty well. I figured if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So I actually have a piece of PVC pipe that's about 2 inches or 2.5 inches in diameter that I put a cap on one end, and I filled it up with Croil, and then I can just drop the whole assembly into it, let it sit for a day or two, and then I'll pull it out, hit it with some compressed air, and then wipe it off, reinstall it, call it a day. So, but now that everything is clean, I guess we can go ahead and start the reassembly process. We want to make sure that the hammer is recessed back into the frame. Makes pulling the slide back a little easier. There is a buffer, as I mentioned earlier, and it has a hole that goes all the way through it. And the hole actually has a different diameter on either side. You want to make sure that the larger side is facing forward and the top left if you were holding the pistol. And the reason for that is that the guide rod actually goes into that hole. So, and you can leave it like this and you can try and drop it into the assembly, or you can do it piece by piece, which we'll do right now. So we'll go ahead and drop our slide on. And like I said, make sure that the larger hole is facing forward and top left. And then we can take our guide rod firing pin assembly, and you should be able to just squeeze it back a little bit and then just press it down into the slide. And then we should be able to retract our slide, lock it in place. And like I said, don't let it slam forward or else, parts can come flying off of it and everything. So there we should be good to go. And then we can reinstall our barrel assembly. So tilt that in. And as I had mentioned in my other video, the frame on this pistol is actually an aluminum alloy. So it does not need to be torqued down to 500 foot-pounds or anything. Generally, I just tighten it to where it's nice and snug, and then I'll back it off and then just re-tighten it a little bit, and that should be fine. Go ahead and drop our slide, and then we can reattach our sight base and rear sight. Be aware that the front and rear screws are actually different lengths. The front screw is significantly shorter than the rear, but they are the same thread pitch, so you can actually swap the screws out by mistake. But if you use the rear screw in the front hole, it won't subside into the sight base, and the front of your sight base will actually be loose. So make sure you put the longer screw in the rear. And try to line this all up. And I use the same tightening method on this sight assembly as I do for the front screw. This top strap sight base is plastic, so it doesn't need to be torqued down crazy either, but we'll go ahead and tighten it up, back it off, tighten it a couple times, get it snug, and you're good. And from here we can do a function check. Make sure the slide doesn't bind. Make sure the slide release holds open, and then you can check to make sure it drops. Good. We'll go ahead and I'm not going to squeeze the trigger completely, but I can feel that there is tension there. And then we can drop our magazine and check to make sure that the magazine disconnect function works. And then we'll go ahead and check the safety to make sure it doesn't fire, which everything seems to be working here. Last round bolt hold open, stays back. If everything functions as it should, then you're pretty much ready for the range. Go ahead and wipe it down and you're good to go. So other than that, I think that pretty much covers my knowledge and experience with the AAC Dragonfly. Hope you enjoyed the video and got something out of it. Thanks again for watching. And like I said, if anybody has any additional information, questions, or comments, please leave them below. Don't forget to like, dislike, share, and subscribe. I plan to do some other videos featuring some pretty rare and unique firearms, as well as testing and reviewing some other firearm-related products. So subscribe to get notified. As always, remember your Second Amendment rights are always under attack. Every gun law is 100% unconstitutional. So thanks again for sticking around, and hope you enjoy the range videos. Take care.